And we're live. Welcome back, hackers. With me is Simona Pop from Status. Hi, Simona.
Hello, hello. Good morning. Night, I don't know. Is it nighttime anywhere right now? Probably. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Antek, and I'm super glad to be here and to chat to you about the evolution of communities. So, without further ado, I will dive into my slides. I head up community for Status, by the way, and some of the things that we'll be touching on are what framework and infrastructure is already there for us to really ensure that that evolution of communities is something that is valuable, that is incredibly useful in terms of community development, in terms of community dynamics, in terms of the future of communities, really. So let's make sure I shared the right thing. There we go. So Communities 3.0. The evolution of communities, the reason why I like to think of it as 3.0 and in terms of evolution is because I feel evolution is so much more encompassing than revolution. Revolutions sometimes happen very quickly and don't necessarily manage to change very much. Because what you find is when you remove a piece of a puzzle, whatever you put in its place has to take the shape, the exact shape of what was removed. And so a lot of the times when we chat about a revolution, it sounds incredibly promising and incredibly exciting and, could promise change. But more often than not, that isn't really the case because you need the whole puzzle to change, not just one piece. And so evolution, as a result of that, is something that can be truly a subject of long-term change. Now, what we're seeing with communities for a very long time, communities were, and you'll see from these definitions here, they were very kind of specific space based. It was people living in the same place, or everybody living, or I guess native to a particular area or a place or a body of nations. So it all was very geographically or kind of earth based. Whereas now we're evolving to the stage where it's much more three-dimensional. So we're moving to a space where it's no longer one-dimensional definition, but rather a 3D definition of what communities are. And we can see this very clearly. We had that community 1.0, again, that physical location. You were thinking about the people in your kind of proximity, in your very close space, your physical space. Then we had the community 2.0, which kind of went a little bit broader. You had the body of people or things viewed collectively, but also around maybe a similar purpose or an alignment of values or religion and so on. So you're kind of moving, we moved to that space where it wasn't just the physical location. And now we're entering, and we have actually entered the community 3.0, which is this 360-degree human approach, which actually is a proactive choice rather than you just fit in here because of these factors, right? Which, as we said before, were either kind of religion-based, physical location, and so on. And here we choose to belong to something, and we choose to contribute to something and exchange and put in value and extract value out of it. So it becomes a much richer dynamic. And again, as I mentioned, it is a proactive engagement and involvement. And we can see this very clearly in crypto right now, where we are discovering and laying the foundations, or rather improving the foundations of these communities, and how these communities, these 3D communities, behave, engage, work, function, and again, evolve. So this is a great comparison that basically shows, obviously it's a DAOs versus companies dynamic by Aragon, but it very much focuses on that transparency, that openness, that fully global, really no longer tied to a physical location, and also a grassroots loose. There aren't those restrictions and those kind of cemented lines that we've been so used to in Web 2, and as we have seen and grown through those previous community stages, are very in line with the kind of the attributes on the right hand side, right? Not always global, not transparent, hierarchical, tight, and so on. So it's really a relaxation of and almost a redesign of those cemented lines when we speak about Communities 3.0. And really what that comes down to, and as we see here, the hierarchy, the tightness, the kind of restrictions, it's a lot to do with what we are seeing now with crypto communities. It is about empowering people, and it is about transacting value in a way in which we haven't necessarily seen for decades. It becomes something much more democratic, much more about the people and the participation, versus a top-down extractive dynamic, which again is the way we have been kind of conditioned to look at when it comes to interaction, when it comes to community life, when it comes to economic dynamics and so on. And really what that leads us to is a shift from a focus of power, which is, that ability to influence, to direct the behavior of others, and the potentially the lives of others by those dynamics of power, which are incredibly extractive, to a dynamic of empowerment, which is actually the authority or agency given to somebody to do something. And again, with Communities 3.0, we are seeing that empowerment dynamic come into play, and we have been seeing it for the past few years, but I would say that in the past few months, maybe let's say 8 to 10 months, it's really come to the fore with community tokens, with governance, with everything that goes into democratizing the access, and also empowering participation and participants, whether they be individuals and communities, and participating in those communities. And all of that, of course, is due to the fact, and I love this quote by Albert. It was at East London in 2020, one of those last events where we were all together, but this is the first time in a very long time that actually we have so many parts of that computing stack accessible to be worked on in a practical context. And this is incredibly important and incredibly exciting. And we need to remember this, particularly when we get sidetracked and talk about price way too much. This is the bit that is incredibly exciting. And this is the part that is allowing us and enabling us to redesign and to have the means to evolve to that Community 3.0. It has all of the tooling, and it enables us to build that tooling to bring about that next stage, and that next stage of evolution in communities. And actually, we are seeing this, right? So we're seeing a lot of activity, and it's wonderful to see. And it's, again, it has just gone incredibly crazy in a very, very good way, with a lot of Web3 solutions to what Web2 had to offer, which was extremely one-sided and not necessarily, as we said, as valuable. Now, this is a great slide that I picked from about microeconomy tooling, and you can see here just and this is a small selection of what is being built, but you can see already we have that community engagement. It is becoming richer and richer, and it is empowering more and more people to actually get involved in the running of their communities and the running of the groups and the projects that they are part of. But one thing that hasn't been changing, right? We look at this, we go, wonderful, so much to do with NFTs, so much to do with tokens and different flows of value, and empowering creators and putting them in charge of how they create and how they monetize and how value flows. But one thing that hasn't really changed is that social and communication tooling part. Right? We still function with those Web2 solutions. And so what's happening here? And it really also needs to this particular kind of vertical and key piece in the running and the life of communities. The social and communication tooling needs to shift to that Web3 dynamic, because we keep using a lot of the things here. I just included some Discord screenshots, but of course we also have Telegrams and so on. And really, they are definitely not in line with the things that we want to see in that 3.0 stage of evolution. And so one of the things that I'm incredibly excited about is the fact that Status, for instance, has the ingredients needed to elevate that social and community tooling. And the reason for that is, I mean, for those of you who don't know, Status has been around since 2017. And it had this idea of mixing these three very, very important ingredients, right? A privacy-first messenger, a non-custodial crypto wallet, and a private Web3 browser in one application. Why is this important? It's important because the functionality piece of bringing all of these three ingredients together opens up a whole host of possibilities and value for communities and the individuals that are taking part in building those communities. Why? Because we continue to essentially look at Web3 and its principles and what we love about crypto, which is the privacy element, the decentralization element, the complete removal of third parties from our processes, the restoration of data ownership to the individual. Yet we continue to use the tools that don't necessarily do that for us. And so this is a very, very quick snapshot of what anonymous and privacy first communication can bring to a community. And let us remember that we keep kind of, I don't know, throwing privacy, the word privacy around quite a bit, but let us remember that it is a human right. And we need to get comfortable with having that as our right and fighting for it and making sure that it is a part of our reality, not just something that we kind of maybe need when we get deplatformed or, bad things happen to us. We need to remember that privacy should be a proactive endeavor, and it should be part of our constant reality. And so, one of the things that I'm incredibly excited about is the fact that Status, for instance, has the ingredients needed to elevate that social and community tooling. And the reason for that is, I mean, for those of you who don't know, Status has been around since 2017. And it had this idea of mixing these three very, very important ingredients, right? A privacy-first messenger, a non-custodial crypto wallet, and a private Web3 browser in one application. Why is this important? It's important because the functionality piece of bringing all of these three ingredients together opens up a whole host of possibilities and value for communities and the individuals that are taking part in building those communities. Why? Because we continue to look at Web3 and its principles and what we love about crypto, which is the privacy element, the decentralization element, the So the private messaging is incredibly important. Now, what happens when you integrate that with a wallet is you make transactions 10x easier. And why does that matter? Because when you have that access to a private messenger plus that non-custodial wallet that basically handles any tokens, and a private Web3 browser, you get to a point where you can mix all of these to create community spaces that enable participation and transaction and the exchange of value in one place. One of the things that for me was at times incredibly frustrating was the fact that newcomers into the space would have to not only download a wallet or get set up on a wallet, they would then have to navigate somewhere else and potentially somewhere else and potentially somewhere else for them to do a very simple task. For those of you who know, I used to be the co-founder of the Bounties Network. We had a lot of tasks, and a lot of newcomers to the ecosystem would essentially use it to onboard themselves onto into Ethereum and into Web3. Again, a lot of the times, because they had to go through so many different stages, a lot of people would drop off because it would be incredibly laborious. Like in this dynamic where you bring everything in one, there is one application to download. There is one to many from the perspective of access, which is incredibly valuable. So what this brings us to is this idea of crypto social, crypto communication, essentially all of the goodness that we have in that infrastructure, with that decentralization, with that privacy, with that accessibility, all into one. And so what that brings us to is native crypto flows. Right now, and this is a little bit of alpha for you, but this is something that we are with Status building a communities feature that will essentially bring all of those pieces together to create valuable community spaces for the people using them. Why do I say this? Because we have so many crypto flows that are right now completely out of our experience as members of communities and as community builders and as community creators, but they are there and the tooling is there to build them. And so whatever is achieved right now with bots and all sorts of different kind of makeshift Web 2-ish into Web 3 links, bridges, whatever you want to call them, let us replace them with those native crypto flows that are so much more, I guess, easier to use, much more precise, much more valuable for the people using them. You also have that community creation and community access-based dynamic that will be incredibly valuable for a lot of the communities out there who use token-based access to essentially manage the participation of different members to different conversations and different initiatives and so on. So again, this becomes something that is much easier to dive into, to participate in, to set up, because again, let us remember that having something that is mobile first, but also has a desktop counterpart brings that power to the many. And this is something that personally I'm incredibly interested in. I am not a subscriber of the few meme discourse. I think it is incredibly important to have and to democratize participation and make it accessible to as many people as possible. The reason why, for instance, with many of the different communities that I interact with, Latin America, for instance, they will access a lot of the digital platforms out there through mobile first. And so being able to give them this one-stop shop, for lack of a better word, that was a horrible I hate that phrase. I don't know why I used it. We can ignore that. But it is incredibly, incredibly valuable to have everything in one place and all of the tooling there for you to then choose what is relevant and what is valuable for your community. And this matter of choice is incredibly important. And as far as I'm concerned, is what Web3 is all about. What we are doing here is we're not only diversifying value, because the whole of the crypto experience is hopefully teaching us, we still have a lot to learn, or rather to unlearn. It isn't just about the money. It isn't just about the monetary monoculture that we've been used to for so many years, but it is understanding that value is human, is social, cultural, physical. There are so many gradients in that value, let's say, proposition, that we need to learn what that engagement and participation looks like and what those flows are all about. And I feel that with Communities 3.0, we are finally able to really look at that value and make it an actual, well, make it a reality rather than just reducing it all to cash money. Restoring choice and the human right to privacy. Again, everything that we are working towards, as far as I'm concerned, is a modular dynamic where the users and, well, rather, no, the participants in the community have the choice to participate or not. The community builders have the choice to pick and choose the modules and the tooling that is open source and is relevant to their very specific community values, community dynamics, community flows. It is a choice, and it should be with the participants. And then redesigning those value flows, as I mentioned earlier, and those community spaces. I like to think of them as community spaces because it becomes, again, a not necessarily obviously a physical place, but rather a space where people can communicate, can transact value, can interact, can engage, and all of that tooling should be there to facilitate that and democratize that as much as possible. And so this essentially becomes our proposition and what we are aiming for with this crypto social and with the communities tooling that we're working on at Status, but I think that a lot of people should be working on, because it is an important piece in the evolution of communities and where we are all hopefully moving towards. I think delivering value for the participants of communities and delivering the tooling for those communities to engage the participants, to ensure that they are set up for a dynamic of thriving versus extraction is incredibly important. And I want to remind us all that when something is so incredibly creative, the limits are in our imagination. And I want to reiterate that because I think it's incredibly important for us to remember that we are at the stage of incredible creativity, incredible exploration, and we should absolutely go much further than we have, and not just recreate what we have had, not just use what is there because it works right now. I think we should be pushing those boundaries because it is important to level out the playing field in terms of access, empower participants, empower individuals and communities, and hopefully, and I want us all to be part of this conversation, hopefully we can bring or make a step in that direction with what we're building with communities at Status. So I want to thank you all very much. There is a link there in the discuss thread. You will see the crypto social topic, and so please dive in. Thoughts, questions, any type of idea, I think is incredibly, incredibly important. And we would love to hear from you. I think building communities with the community is a great way to do things. So thank you very much.
Simona, thank you very much for the presentation. I love it. It really reminds me of web, like the community 3.0 reminds me of early stages of internet that I remember from like early 2000s, where people actually paid for their hosting and had to build their own websites and actually own it, and not just host it on a blog platform, but actually owns the everything you publish there.
Exactly.
Yeah, so that's really exciting. And yeah, apart from the economic change that crypto brings, I think that could be even more important than that. And you mentioned
100%.
that, yeah, you mentioned that a concept of native crypto flows.
Yes.
And can you please expand on that? Explain the concept.
So what I mean by native crypto flows is obviously everything that we're seeing right now with the different communities, particularly the token-based ones or communities that have a token. There is so much in terms of dynamics, incentives, access flows that are right now handled through bots because we are working with Web 2 based platforms like Discord, like Telegram. You have to have that bot element to enable that bridge between wallets and people holding either NFTs or ERC20s in their wallet to basically either access certain channels, be able to participate in voting, and so on. What I'm saying is you can have that native crypto flow in what we're building with Status because you have the wallet inbuilt. And so there's no need for that extra kind of tool or rather bridge because it's fully a Web3 experience. You have the chat that is fully Web3, you have the wallet that is fully Web3, and you have the browsing that is fully Web3. So you're like moving completely off the Web2 experience and have the full native crypto flow in the community participation experience and the community building experience, right? Because again, all of the community builders right now are having to look at the different solutions out there that have been, and they work great, but I think evolving to a fully Web3 experience is where we should be going, right? Versus just like sitting in that Web2/Web3, let's kind of one leg in each boat dynamic. It's time to evolve to that fully Web3 experience.
Okay, but now I understand the concept. And what's your plan to onboard the communities and to gain the critical mass that every social network needs?
So I think in terms of the different phases, we've basically phased this out into different stages. I think one of the key things to understand is that when you are building something that requires a certain degree of moderation, yet you have censorship resistance at the protocol level, it's an interesting proposition, right? And so this is one of the big things that is, for instance, a key consideration when you are building that privacy first, but with a need for moderation, because you do need to have a certain degree of moderation in the communities and in the channels. I think right now we're at that stage where we're making sure that the performance of what is being built is in line with what we're all used to in Web 2. But you're doing it in Web3, so it takes a minute, right? And so what we're doing right now is running a lot of user sessions, user research sessions to understand what the problems are, what the problems that different types of communities, token-based and not, are encountering with their current community management or community tooling. And by understanding that, we can better look at what we are designing, how we're thinking about these flows, and make sure that they are actually in line with those needs and they actually provide a solution, versus there is that usual kind of tendency in crypto, hey, I've built a solution, where is the problem? I must fit it to the solution. No, I think it's incredibly, incredibly important and sound to understand what the problems are, to understand what should work better, and then make sure that we bake it into the flows and the functionality and the different kind of modules and modularity that people will, that builders and community creators will be able to utilize. And like I said, it is incredibly important that the choice is with them. I don't want to impose a certain degree of or a certain flow. It's important for the choice to be with those builders.
Okay, and how are we going to gain the users? Like, yeah.
A lot of the things that we will do is we will work with some pioneer communities who will come on board first. It could be a dynamic of potentially having a smaller group of settlers from one external community coming in and kind of setting a base within status and then moving everything over. I think the key factor is, will it deliver value for those communities? And if it will, then we absolutely do it in stages with smaller communities. There will be a lot of communities that don't necessarily have a space of their own who will make the status community piece their first home, or rather their first kind of solid home. And I think it will just, again, be an evolution and a phased adoption, which is absolutely understandable and something that we absolutely know will happen.
Cool. So when are we going to be able to move 0x Hack community?
I'll count you into our pioneer group so that you basically get to test drive it a little bit earlier and see how you feel. And then, you know, hopefully we can start moving things later on this year. We are initially testing, like I said, with some very, very small groups, one of them being the Status Punks. It's a grassroots kind of community that is within the status community. We've been testing it with them for, I would say, about 2-3 weeks now. And then we will slowly, as we add more functionality, start opening up a little bit more. So you will hear from us when it's ready to test drive.
Awesome. Fantasy. Yeah, Simona, thank you very much for your time.
Absolutely.
It was a pleasure, as always. And yeah, I hope to see you again soon.
Great. Thank you so much for the invite, and good luck hacking, everybody. Excited to see what everyone is building.
Yeah, the hackathon ends on Monday, so we'll be able to see what you are all working on.
Awesome.
Bye.
See you later.